Hello, everybody. Welcome to the Hot Tag here on the PFC Entertainment Network. Along with Shawn Grugel, I'm Jason Clouse. We certainly appreciate you taking time out of your day, out of your week to give the show a listen. We're coming into episode 2 here. Last week, we laid out the foundation of what this show is going to be. Shawn, you and I, we kind of had expectations, I guess, going into this right out of the gate. And there was a degree of anticipation when we announced that the show was going to drop. And I'll be honest with you. Of all the pilots that I have done here on the network, I had I guess I had a preconceived notion of the reach this particular program was going to have. And I don't mind telling you, I was a little bit disappointed with the initial response or feedback.
Lack of response?
Sure.
Yeah, me too, man. I mean, people have been asking us to do a wrestling show since you started the PFC network. I mean, yeah, you have the Turnbuckle Time Machine, but that is more of a retrospective on wrestling of the past.
Right.
People wanted a show of, wrestling now, and we gave it to them. And honestly, the response to me was more than disappointing. To me, it's basically, well, what is this going to do for me, and why should I support it? And that's why these people are not listening to the show. What this show is going to do for you is to show you the mistakes that you are making along the way and what you can do to make this business better. Quite frankly, I'm sick of this basement. I'm sick of this business going into the basement. It is not where it should be at right now. I do like seeing a larger crowds in independent shows, but at the same time, and I did get some feedback on this, wrestling today is nothing more than a cosplay of what it was for the last 20 years. And that is the best way I could put what wrestling is now.
You're absolutely right. And that's kind of the resistance, and the little feedback that I did get is, the argument is, well, the business is evolving. This is where it's evolving to. And I understand that the business has to evolve with the times, but there is a way to evolve the business and still maintain the grassroots of what made it what it is. Because if you don't have the foundation in place, everything that you do beyond that is set yourself up for failure and the inevitable fall. And it's not necessarily the fall that's going to kill you. It's that at the end of it. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, I know exactly what you're saying, brother. Go on. I didn't mean to cut you off.
No, it's perfectly fine. Here this week, because we laid out in our pilot episode a number of different aspects that we could take the conversation in. And that's why this show is going to be what it is. Because we could spend an entire episode on this aspect or that aspect or this, that, and the other thing. But where is the root of the problem in today's product? Where is the root of the issue that is putting the entire landscape of this business in jeopardy? And it goes right to the very top. It goes to the worldwide promotions, and more specifically in the independent circuit as well. The lack of psychology. The lack of psychology is what's killing this business. Instead of trying to put logic in behind your presentation, you're trying to get the oohs and the ahs and the this is awesome chants, but they're not for the right reasons. And when you start getting really deep into this, Shawn, this is what's going to ruffle people's feathers. This is what's going to make workers be like, well, these guys don't know anything. Bullshit.
What workers are doing nowadays, they're looking for that Meltzer 5-star rating. And if anyone knows me, I fucking hate Dave Meltzer with a passion that burns like brighter than no other. I hate Dave Meltzer. They're looking for that viral moment, that one spot, that one high spot that's going to get their name out there. And that's what the problem is they're doing it for themselves. They're not doing it for the business. They're not doing it for the crowd. They're doing it for themselves and their buddies in the back. That way they can get the slap on the back when they get into back into the gorilla position. Man, that was a hell of a spot. No, it's not that. It should be, man, that's a hell of a match, and we're putting on a hell of a show.
You really just wrapped it right up there. Right there, because their mentality is, and we kind of touched on this last week. It's not about anymore. It's not about getting the entire product or promotion over. It's about what you're doing individually and the adulation that comes away from that. Now, when you broke into the business in 1996, when you were being trained by the late great Malcolm Monroe, how big of a part was psychology in the training that you underwent once you started to get to a point to where you were going to start going into the ring for actual matches?
It started right off the bat. I mean, he would show us a move, and this is why you are doing this. It wasn't about all the time about how to do the move. It was about why you were doing the move, what's to come, and what's it going to lead to. Anymore, I see these guys before shows, and they're like, okay, well, what if I hold on to your hand, I climb up to the top rope, I do a twisting front flip, land on your shoulders, turn that into a hurricanrana, and you go flying over the top rope to the 6 guys that are waiting on the floor. Okay, but what does that lead to? Why are you doing this? Why are the 6 guys on the floor? You know what I'm saying? There is no why anymore. It's all about how. And that isn't how this business is supposed to work.
The entire premise of professional wrestling, and you can take it back to the very beginnings of what was recognized as professional wrestling, was based on legitimate athletic sport.
Psychological sport.
Yeah. 2 dudes are trying to win a match.
One good guy, one bad guy.
With a referee in the middle.
That was never seen and didn't have a gimmick when they walked down to the ring. Just want to throw it in.
Thank you for adding that, because I was going to bring that around later on. But you look back, and I realize that workers nowadays, fans nowadays, they will go back and look at a piece of footage from 1963. And they can't watch it. They can't stomach it because it's too boring. Well, if you really take the pomp and the circumstance of what you're looking at here and now with the entrance music and the videos and the lights and the pyrotechnics and all this bullshit, when you strip all of that away, what you're supposed to see in the ring is supposed to be a variation of what it was back in the 60s. Back in the 50s. The NWA, the National Wrestling Alliance, has roots that go back to the early 1900s. Now, did they have pyrotechnics when wrestlers walked out at that? Did George Hackenschmidt come out with, with the big entrance video and all this shit? No. The man went in there and went toe to toe with his opponent.
Not only that, but was able to elicit feelings and responses from the crowd to where you knew immediately who was the antagonist and who was the protagonist. Or if those words are too big for our listening audience because they can't figure out how to download this fucking show, the good guy or the bad guy. Oh, is that heel heat right there?
I'm like, man, you're kind of fired up here this week, and I love it. I'm here for it. I mean, we're talking about psychology this week. Uh, as we go on in the coming weeks, there's going to be other aspects, and a lot of it's going to be a lot of this footage that you send me that gets me fired up of what's being presented as professional wrestling. But that's a story for an upcoming week. But the bottom line is this, and you've seen aspects of this in WWE. You see it on full display in AEW. Anytime I've been over to your house and you will have me watch Dynamite or whatever show they've got going on, I say the same damn thing. What is this spot fest that's being passed off as a goddamn match? There is no logic behind this. You said something very, and the lack of psychology is this. And you said it perfectly. It's not about why, it's about how. But you have to incorporate the why. It has to make sense. And I understand that in professional wrestling, there are aspects of it that you have to suspend your disbelief. Otherwise, you're just going to rip it apart for being quote unquote fake or whatever the hell. When it doesn't, because people don't take the time to actually analyze what's really happening. You are playing off real life emotions. But if there's not some degree of sense that, oh, that made sense, I understand why he's doing that or this move or that move. Everything that is being presented now, all these hurricanranas and all this shit off the top rope, and there's an army of people on the floor, and they're just standing there waiting for the dude to jump off the top rope. Now, I'm here to tell you, if that was to happen in a real life fight, and I'm in a brawl on the floor, and I happen to look up and I see some jackass is going to jump off a rope or a balcony or something, I'm moving the fuck out of the way. You know, I'm not going to sit there and catch them.
You know, let's strip wrestling down to the very basic components. Okay. Wrestling consists of a good guy and a bad guy. A good promoter is going to put a bad guy in a position to where he is built to be so hated that the next good guy to take him down is going to be the big hero. Is going to be your big baby face. Now, let's look at the two major companies right now, AEW and WWE. Right now, in WWE, it's very storyline driven. I don't know how many days Roman Reigns has as heavyweight champion right now, but he's getting ready to surpass Hulk Hogan as the champ.
He's the next big one. Yeah, excuse me.
Right.
Yeah.
So right now, they're looking for the next star to topple Roman Reigns. Who did they have to bring back? They brought back The Rock, probably one of the most over characters during the Attitude Era. If the writers are smart, they're going to put Roman Reigns over The Rock to build him as the biggest bad guy in the company. Imagine what that's going to do to the next babyface that pins Roman Reigns. It's going to elevate them to unheard levels in WWE right now. Let's talk about Logan Paul, one of the most hated men in WWE right now. He wins the United States title, hasn't wrestled one time in 62 days, I think it is.
Right.
They are building him to be a huge bad guy. The guy that takes him down is going to be a superstar. Now let's look at AEW. I can't because there is no storylines going on in AEW. Tony Khan is nothing more than a mark who is just building dream matches, who is putting together spot fests. Now, you can say that the Adam Cole MJF storyline is going to be a big storyline. Okay, great. It hasn't had no time to grow. It hasn't had no time to breathe. There is going to be no super pop. Yeah, there's going to be no super good guy to come out of this. You have to give You have to give a gimmick time to breathe. You have to give your match time to breathe. It has to age. The audience has to connect with it. They have to, be emotionally connected to it. So that way, when something big happens, you get that emotional response. People are going to be so happy when Roman Reigns gets toppled that whoever beats him, his merchandise sales are going to go through the roof. Right now, independent wrestling is being built much the same way as AEW. Promoters are no longer taking the time to build storylines. They're no longer taking time to build heels. They're no longer taking time to build faces. They are of the mindset that wrestling fans have a 30-second degree of attention span to spend watching these shows. Now, take nothing away from what's going on right now. Jason, when you and we formed a power trip in the MWO, that storyline lasted over a year, if I remember correctly.
It closed in on 2 years. Yeah.
Yeah. And we were taking, when we first started at Terry's Lounge in Flint, Michigan, we took a crowd of about 15 people and we turned that son of a bitch into standing room only because people could not wait to see us get our asses kicked. That's the problem with wrestling now. We are not building an emotional response. We are not using psychology to bring people into these shows. What are we doing nowadays? We're waiting to see someone die. We're waiting for someone to lose a limb. We're waiting for someone to lose buckets of blood. We're booking death matches. We're booking shit that someone is going to get hurt or killed. The only way someone is ever going to be pinned is if they take a shotgun blast to the face. And this is what wrestling is becoming. And there is no foundation, as you say. The only foundation that they have now is what the promoter or booker wants to see. Hell, promoters, they'll book one guy 20 miles away as a heel, but in its home company, they're a babyface. It just doesn't make any sense anymore.
That is a couple of things here. I want to go back a little bit and talk about the storyline aspect as to why storylines resonate the way that they do, or the way that they did versus what's happening here and now. Because when you have a quote unquote storyline, and you're right, WWE has always been storyline driven. Their business model is creating larger than life, real life superheroes, but they maintain a human element. Even at his peak, Hulk Hogan was the ultimate real life superhero. He took on all the bad guys internationally and domestically. That's how he was built.
Think about the bad guys he was taking on. He was taking on the Soviet Union. He was taking on Iran. He was taking on Germany. He was taking on modern day conflict in single character motions. He was taking real world experience that was happening and incorporated it into wrestling. What do we got now? Cancel culture? Who the hell is he going to wrestle now?
Right.
Sorry, I had to put that out there.
Oh, and that's going to be. We actually have a T-shirt over at our new online store at cafepress.com/PFC Network. Cancel this. But be that as it may, would you say, and I know people have an opinion of Hogan one way or the other. You either loved him and respect him for what he did, or you hate him and you've labeled him as this, that, or the other thing, a politician, a racist, whatever. But in the 1980s and into the 90s, professional wrestling wouldn't be what it is now without the influence of Hulk Hogan. Now, having said that, and I realize, people are going to scoff at that because I am indeed wearing a Hogan shirt today, but that's, it's the 40th anniversary of his goddamn run in WWF. So yeah, I'm celebrating all month, but
I'm dressed as the Kool-Aid man.
That's okay. Oh yeah. Oh yeah. What would you say was the most as fans? What would you say we were most dialed into in terms of Hogan's rivalries. Yeah, the thing with the Iron Sheik was big because, well, he toppled Iran, who had stolen the WWF title from Bob Backlund in American fans' minds. He wins the title from the Iron Sheik. He takes on Nikolai Volkov. He's taken on all these guys, Big John Studd, King Kong Bundy, the giants of wrestling. But I look back on his career, and the two biggest conflicts, the two biggest rivalries throughout his entire career was against Andre the Giant, which led to WrestleMania 3, and Randy Macho Man Savage, which led to WrestleMania 5. What's the common thread here? Because they were believable conflicts that went beyond the superhero persona and solicited a response because of the human element, a fractured friendship, a team, a business partnership that dissolved with jealousy and rage because of all these real life emotions that you and I as humans and everybody else could relate to. Now, the only thing that I can correlate that here and now in this day and age is the Bloodline storyline, because it was allowed to breathe, like you were saying. It was allowed to have time to materialize. It was allowed to introduce the cast of characters, establish what side of the proverbial conflict they were on, and then they were off to the races. That's why Roman's stock went off the fucking charts, because people, much like you were saying, were waiting for somebody to topple the king. And that, I mean, any other time, Sami Zayn ain't getting over. You know what I'm saying? He just isn't. He's a good worker, but you're not going to see him above the title on a promotional poster by and large. You're just not. But you will Roman Reigns.
It was a 15-year build between Hulk Hogan and Andre the Giant, unbeknownst to Vince McMahon Jr. at the time. 15 years, Andre went undefeated. Andre turned heel. He became one of the biggest heels in WWF history. You put Hulk Hogan over top of him, and let's just say it, at that point in time, it left the footprint of Hulkamania. You could say it started with the Sheik, but when he beat Andre the Giant, it was at a fever pitch. People want to see Roman Reigns beat, like right now. Why? He's putting guys over. He's building guys up. Like you said, Sami Zayn, yeah, he was big in Ring of Honor, but it's real easy to be a big fish in a small pond. He took Sami Zayn in WWE and made him a main eventer.
Right.
That's the problem nowadays. I want to see Roman. I want to see Roman beat. People are so quick to turn the heat off on a stew that's going to be so much better when it simmers a little while longer. That's the same problem with the independents. If these indie companies were to have gotten together, find one big heel, and there's a couple of them out there, and just built that heel, pretty soon, these indie companies would have had a valuable commodity to put their babyface over on them. This is why when indie companies bring in names, and when I say names, I'm saying former WWE, former AEW superstars, they should be putting their home-brewed guys over these names to build them, to give them that stepping stone to reach that, upper echelon, to become the baby face of these companies. Anymore, man, these bookers, it's like fantasy booking. You know what I'm saying? Oh, Sami Callihan's out there. Let's bring him in. And I want to see him versus, I'm just going to put Dread King Logan out there. And then they put Sami Callihan over Dread King Logan. Well, that's great. You put an established superstar over a guy that could have been a megastar in your company. But because you buried him with this superstar, what's next? You as a promoter and a booker, it's just not the psychology that happens in the ring. It has to happen behind the scenes. You have to learn how to build your brand. You have to learn how to build your workers. You have to learn how to build that emotional response from your audience, because that emotional response is what's going to make sense. And when I say sense, if it doesn't make sense, it doesn't make dollars. And that's what you got to do. And this is why we call it the business, not my personal wrestling show. It's a business first.
Personal wrestling show is that's a damning statement to make, because there's a lot of promoters out there that's how they conduct their business. They don't look at improving the business or building the stars of tomorrow, or it is like their personal playground.
Personal playground.
Yeah. Much like what Tony Khan's doing, just on a bigger scale. And I'll get heat for that. I don't give a fuck. I don't. Because you can't argue it. If you're going to be honest with yourself, you can't argue it. Does he see success? Yeah, he does. But because, he's got the resources that pays for that. That's the bottom line.
If I had Daddy's bankroll, I could run successful shows too. And I guarantee you, in my opinion, I think they would be more successful than what Tony Khan is doing. Again, that's my opinion. I'll take heat for it, but that's just the way I'm looking at it. Yeah, I think I can do a better job. And I just flat out say it. Am I able to go out there and do a better job? No, but I think I proved it when I was running TWX, when I sold out to Birch Run Expo Center.
Yeah. And that was a statement unto itself. Now, you said, you used the example of big names coming into your promotion to work with your top talent and what happens in that scenario. That was the basis of the territories back in the 70s, 60s, 70s, and 80s. And I'll use the National Wrestling Alliance as an example, because you had all of these smaller promotions throughout the United States that operated under the NWA banner. Then you would have a Harley Race come in, who was the recognized heavyweight champion of the world of the NWA, not of Houston Wrestling, not of the St. Louis market, not of Florida Championship Wrestling, the NWA. All these promotions worked under or with the NWA umbrella. So you would get the Von Erichs, for example, in Dallas. You would build up Kevin Von Erich or Kerry Von Erich or whoever. And then you would bring Ric Flair in for a special attraction.
And if you don't mind me saying, if you brought in the Von Erichs, they were baby faces, because they were baby faces in Texas. If you brought in Ric Flair, he was a heel. I mean, the promoters kept the fabe. You know what I'm saying? They kept their storylines going. I'm sorry, Jason, you can continue. I just had to get that out.
No, see, Sean, but that's the problem. That's where don't apologize, because it's things like that that have to be brought to the table. This is the shit that is being glossed over or just outright ignored for that holy shit moment. Okay, your holy shit moment is one moment in time. Nobody is going to remember that a month from now unless something catastrophic happens. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
But by God, you remember Kerry Von Erich versus Ric Flair at Texas Stadium.
And it wasn't no flippy doos. It was a fucking iron claw, just a hand to the head.
Actually, to correct you, and I don't mean to do this, but it was a fucking backslide that Von Erich used to win the heavyweight championship from Ric Flair at that show. Now, granted, some asshole is going to hear that and be like, well, if David hadn't died, Kerry wouldn't have won the title. You're absolutely right. David would have won the title. You see what I'm saying? So, yeah, Kerry Von Erich was inserted in there because it was a memorial show for David, who had passed away. That was on full display in this movie Iron Claw. All right. And that's going to be an episode unto itself later on, because anyway.
I haven't seen it yet. But think about the pop Kerry got when he hit that backslide on Rick. I mean, it was the build to the match. It was It was to simmer before the main course. You know what I'm saying? You got to let that all the ingredients come together, let them meld, let them, they formed a flavor that the fans want. And then when they finally get it, it explodes.
Right, right. And it doesn't, it's those moments where you don't think it could, but then it happens. I'll give you an example here because it wasn't a big high spot. It wasn't a big move done. But Ricky the Dragon Steamboat's winning of the Intercontinental title from the Macho Man at WrestleMania 3 is considered, and it's my favorite match of all time. Of all time. Love that match. Classically done. The only thing I would have taken out of it is George Steele's involvement, but they were in Detroit, so they had to incorporate him in some way or another. But it still made sense because Animal had a long-running rivalry with the Macho Man. So there was an aspect of psychology there. But Shawn, how did Steamboat end Macho Man's run? It was a small package. People in the Silverdome didn't realize what had happened until 2 moments after the fact. The ringside people saw it, but it wasn't until you got that monumental secondary pop from the rest of the dome, they're like, oh, this just happened, and nobody saw it coming. It was either going to end with a Macho Man elbow or a high cross body press from Steamboat because those were their signature moves. Nobody kicked out of those. But it wasn't. It was a move that made sense. There was such a degree of psychology that you're like, I can't believe that happened, but why wouldn't have it happened that way? Savage picked Steamboat up for a body slam. Steamboat held on and rolled him through and hooked him up for the win. That's the psychology part because we were invested from bell to bell. We were invested in that match before the match happened, for weeks, for months, because of the storyline that had materialized with Savage injuring Steamboat and his quote-unquote career was in jeopardy. Then he comes back. They give him the shot at WrestleMania 3, and it winds up being arguably the greatest match in WrestleMania history. And I know people will say Taker and Shawn Michaels and all that. I get that. But for me, psychologically, it's Savage and Steamboat. And guys like Savage, guys like Flair, and I'm not necessarily a big Ric Flair fan. I appreciate him, but like he's not on my Mount Rushmore. He just isn't. I don't know because I grew up in the North, and I know he's a bigger deal in the South, but I appreciate him for what he's done. I don't hate the man. I wish he'd stay the fuck out of the spotlight nowadays because anytime I hear him or see him, he's tarnishing his reputation. But that, be that as it may, the aspect of psychology is what made these guys to this day on the Mount Rushmore on the history of professional wrestling. Do you think in 30 years from now, people are going to say that Kenny Omega is on the Mount Rushmore of wrestling? I don't fucking think so. I don't see the hype with this guy. Good worker? Yes. But psychologically, makes zero sense to me.
That's why, okay, if we're going to go into this conversation, that's why I watch AEW differently than I watch the WWE. I look at AEW as a spot fest show, and I am entertained by it. As I said before, wrestling is a buffet. You can always pick out what you want and what you don't want. But psychologically, AEW doesn't have it. WWE, WWF, I remember the very first live show I went to. I got my very first holy shit that happened moment when Tim Horner pinned Nikolai Volkov, when no one had ever heard of Tim Horner before. And he pinned him with a small package. Another match, a little more modern, when you get to the Attitude Era, Barry Horowitz, when he pinned Body Donna Skip.
Yeah.
If I remember right, it was a small package.
Package or Schoolboy. Now, the Schoolboy is an underrated move, I'm here to tell you. It was always my Achilles heel.
Yeah, yours and mine both. But think about the build that Barry Horowitz had, losing match after match after match after match after match. And he pins Body Donna Skip. Mid-Carter at best in WWE circles. and gets one of the biggest pops of the night because he got his first win. That stew simmered for years. And then finally, did they do anything with Barry Horowitz after that? No. But it was good for him. He had his moment. You know what I'm saying? The psychology was there. It was time to pull the trigger on Horowitz. And they did. And he got a huge pop. Wrestling fans are so fickle nowadays. They're looking for the spot monkeys. They're looking for the death matches. They're looking for the blood. They figure if they pay under $15, $20, $25 on a show, that they need to see someone die or attempt to kill themselves with some big giant spot. One of the things I always said to my students when I was training them, they will never remember you doing 2 or 3 flips in a match. But if you can make them laugh, if you can make them smile, they're going to remember you forever.
Because you're tapping into their psyche.
Yeah, getting that emotional response.
Yeah. That's what made Power Trip so successful beyond what we thought it was. Because what we did psychologically made sense. I was established as one way, you were established as the other, and you and I looked at our audience and what are they feeding off of? What are they dialed into? So when the explosion happened, we did it in such a way, number one, that it was reality based because it psychologically made sense. Jason the Basher Clouse, homegrown MWO guy, popular hero, Levi Blue, quote unquote evil indie worker coming in to shit on the company. And then the next thing you know, what should have been in our fans' minds is us against each other. we did it in such a way, and we kind of worked the majority of the roster too, is we made it psychologically make sense to the word like, oh my God, this is real. This is real. And they're invested. And then when the culmination comes, well, that I had turned to the dark side or I had turned heel, which had been unheard of at that point, man, we were off to the races. You said 15 people the night that we formed Power Trip. By the time it was all said and done, there was standing room only, not just at Terry's Lounge, but our culmination happened at WrestleRama 12 against each other for the heavyweight title. That gym at Bentley Middle School was packed because people were invested in the story. And that's why we were as successful as we were, because we played off real emotion. It made sense.
And before people start shitting all over the MWO and talking their garbage, I want to point something out. When Jason and I were at the height of the Power Trip, we had multiple independent wrestling companies wanting to book us as the Power Trip. I was all for it. Jason, on the other hand, being the owner-operator of the MWO, didn't want to do it. And I respected that. And you know what? It was a good thing because it remained exclusive to the MWO, and we garnered more fans that way. So before any of you condescending motherfuckers start saying anything about the MWO, I want you to know there were promoters then who are still promoting now who wanted us to come wrestle for their company because they wanted that fucking magic. They wanted that fucking psychological edge that we were providing to the MWO fans.
Right. And that's something that's lost for the majority. There are promoters out there, I feel like, that at least are attempting to maintain the psychology part of it. The problem is that when it comes down to it, they will, if anything is going to get abandoned in favor of the holy shit moments or, the this is awesome chant, because I guess nowadays that's what is based upon if it was a good show or not. The psychological part of it is the first thing that gets abandoned. If your moves do not if the transition of moves in a particular spot does not make sense, that it cannot be applied logically in real life, why the fuck are you doing it? Because if you're just looking to be an acrobat, go train to be part of Circus Soleil, or go join the Shriner Circus, or something along these lines, because that's where that mentality belongs. It's not based in an art form or a sport or an entertainment entity that is supposed to be based on logic and reality.
Let me put something out there. Very basic, Jason, and you're going to agree with this. I know you are.
Okay.
I take you, or I take my opponent, and I whip them to the buckle, right? And they hit hard, and they come out. What sense does it make for me to throw myself into the buckle just as hard to come off and hit them with another move? If I'm hitting that buckle just as hard as them, I should be hurting just as hard as they are. That's just one part of being psychological in a match that people don't take into consideration. Workers nowadays, well, I'm supposed to have momentum coming out of the corner. Then what about the opponent you just threw in there? He should be whooping your ass because you just filled him full of momentum, right? Fuck that. That isn't psychology. And it's very, very basic. A tag rope. Most guys don't even hold a tag rope anymore. Why do you hold a tag rope? So you stay in your corner. As a heel, that's a weapon. People don't even think about that anymore. It's psychology. The business is going the way of the spot monkeys and the death matches, and they don't even keep the basic fundamentals proper in a match anymore. It kills me to see this.
And unless the current crop of talent and promoters and trainers start to reestablish the importance of the psychological part of what is professional wrestling, brother, within 20 years, this thing is not going to be what it is. It's right now, professional wrestling is still a respected form of entertainment. Okay, by and large. And it's not because of what the indie promoters are doing. They're looking at the money and the revenue and all this shit that WWE, AEW, and on a lower level, then you get your NWAs and TNA and MLW, bigger independent promotions under the big two. If they don't get back to basic fundamentals of what made wrestling what it is, I am fearful for the future of this business. And we're going to tackle another big problem in that aspect on next week's show when we do a deeper dive into this deathmatch trend that's going on and some of the bullshit that I have been seeing here over the last few weeks specifically. We'll get to that later on. But as we kind of put a bow on this week's episode, Shawn, is there anything that you want to throw out there that we really haven't spent the adequate amount of time on here this week? Because let's face it, man, we could be here for an hour and a half, 2 hours, just talking about breaking down the psychology of the industry. But we're trying to keep this within a respectable amount of time.
To the bookers, to the promoters, and to the trainers, when it comes to these shows, when it comes to these kids, when it comes to these trainees, the basic foundation of a story are a few different things: a who, a what, when, where, why, and how. Without any one of those things, the story becomes convoluted. That's where the loss of psychology comes into play. It's basic story building. Like I said earlier, I'm a fat guy, so I keep going back to the stew. You have to let the stew simmer. Let the crowd get emotionally invested. And then when it comes time, you pull the trigger on that son of a bitch. Because if you don't have that emotional response, then you don't have a product that's worthy to be called professional wrestling.
Can't think of a better way to put a bow on this, man. We encourage you to join the conversation. We encourage your feedback, your comments, questions. anything of the sort, look for us over on Facebook at the Hot Tag Podcast or the PFC Entertainment Network, or you can
encourage. I demand it. I demand it at this point. We putting out the show that you guys want, and the very first day we got 8 fucking downloads. Suck my nuts. Tell your friends about this show, because we're here to educate you guys. We're here to enlighten you guys. We're here to help the business. And quite frankly, if you don't give a fuck about this show, then you're showing me you don't give a fuck about the business, because that's what we're here for. Sorry.
I couldn't agree more. No, absolutely. This is the shit they need to be told. Because this
is the shit that promoters don't want to tell them because they're afraid to get fucking canceled.
That's it. That's it. Actually, I'm changing my mind. Next week, we are going to talk about this whole cancel culture bullshit and how it is poisoning the inner workings of this fucking business. You just got me fucking fired up about this, because that is I'm going to curb this until next week. But make absolute zero mistake about it. This whole cancel culture bullshit, and this is a big contributor as to where this business is heading, because everybody's so goddamn afraid of saying anything. But if you don't say it, you get away from the psychological part. Everything feeds into one another that affects this business. And this is what we're trying to prevent. So yes, next week, go ahead and mark your fucking calendars. We're talking about cancel culture. And I fucking challenge anybody to try to cancel us. It ain't going to fucking happen. I got news for you. So, with that being said, find us over on Facebook, the Hot Tag Podcast or the PFC Entertainment Network. Clouse of the Heart at gmail.com is the email account. So with that, we will see you next week right here on the Hot Tag on the PFC Entertainment Network.
Cancel this.